The fire is small on purpose, tucked down in a dry wash where the dirt walls break the wind and block most of the light. Richard fed it with short pieces of dead sage and split pallet wood he pulled out of a collapsed tool crate. The flame stays low and steady, not throwing a tall glow that can be seen from the flats. I sit with my back against a rock, boots out, slingshot across my lap, and I stare at the orange edge of the coals while I chew the last of a hard strip of dried meat. Richard sits opposite, knees up, machete laid beside him with the edge wrapped, pistol on his right side under his jacket where grit won't get into it. Richard pokes the coals with a stick and says, "Best part of today was the one with the blue hoodie." He doesn't look up when he says it. He doesn't have to. I know which one he means. The walker we watched for 10 minutes while it tried to get a foot free from a shopping cart frame, making that slow, stubborn shuffle in place. I shake my head and keep my voice low. No, best part was the lady with the office badge who kept walking into the same fence post. 3 times, same post. I hold up 3 fingers and Richard snorts once, quick, then looks past me toward the mouth of the wash. He always does that after any sound, even a quiet one. Richard reaches into his pack and pulls out the dented metal cup we share. He tips the bucket a fraction and pours 2 mouthfuls, then passes the cup over. The water smells like rusty pennies and dust. I drink it anyway, slow, and hand it back without spilling. Richard drinks the same amount, then caps the bucket and drags it deeper into shadow. I lean forward and rub grit off my slingshot bands with my thumb. The rubber has fine cracks near the forks from the heat. I keep checking them because a snapped band at the wrong time turns into a bad day. Richard watches me fuss with it and says, "You are going to mourn that thing more than any person you knew before." I look at him and shrug. That thing never tried to take my food. Richard gives me a small smile and points his chin at the bucket. Food is the whole problem. That and water that doesn't taste like a toolbox. We sit quiet for a minute, listening. The desert at night carries sound far if the wind drops. Somewhere out on the flats, a walker drags a foot across metal and it makes a short scrape. Richard turns his head, counts the seconds, and decides it is far enough to ignore. I keep my eyes on the coals and say, "We can't stay on this pump water. It is getting worse." Richard nods once. He doesn't argue. He already knows. He is the one who keeps track of how many times I stop to wet my lips with nothing coming out of the canteen. Richard lifts his stick and draws a line in the dirt near the fire. He taps the far end of the line and says, "Drone." Then he draws another line angled off it. Same time, same direction, 2 days. He looks at me. 3rd time tomorrow we follow. I glance up at him and keep my voice low, but I can't help myself. Or it follows us. Maybe it likes your personality. Richard points the stick at me, slow. If it follows us, we leave. If we follow it, we might find food. He pauses and adds, or a trap. The word trap sits there between us and does what it always does. It turns the jokes quieter. Richard doesn't say my name. He doesn't need to. I stare at the dirt and picture wire half buried in sand, a loop waiting for an ankle, the kind of thing a bored person builds when hunger turns into a hobby. I tell Richard, I lasted 11 years alone. I can last 1 more. It comes out sharp, and I regret the tone. Richard doesn't take it personal. He keeps his eyes on the wash opening and says, "You lasted 11 years by running and hiding and getting lucky. That is not a plan." I let out a short laugh and shake my head. Luck is the only plan I ever had. Richard finally looks at me, then at my slingshot. Luck in you throwing junk at things until they walk the other way. The fire pops once. Richard grabs a handful of dirt and pinches it over the coals to keep sparks down. That's another rule we live by. Light is a signal. Noise is a signal. Heat can be a signal too, if the wrong person is close enough to smell it. Richard shifts his weight and says, "I lasted 12 years alone. Not fun years. Not brave years. Years where I ate cold beans behind a dumpster and slept under a truck." He pokes the coals again, careful. "Then you stepped into a wire and I had to decide if I was going to ignore it and walk away." I roll my eyes. "You talk about it as if you saved a puppy." Richard points the stick at my boot. "You were 2 seconds from being dragged into broken glass and rust. You would have been stuck and loud. The people who set it would have come over." I stare at the fire and say, I remember. My ankle still has a thick scar where the cable cinched hard. Richard sawed through the wire with snips and yanked me free by the collar, and we ran without looking back. I didn't even have time to be mad. I only had time to move. Richard taps ash off his stick and says, "So we don't step into traps. We don't chase miracles. We follow patterns." He nods toward the dark sky. A drone flying on a schedule is a pattern. I stare into the night and picture that drone again, steady and calm, crossing an empty sky where nothing flies anymore. I say, "If it is a pattern, then it returns somewhere." Richard nods. "Yes." I add, "And if it returns somewhere, there is power." Richard shifts his gaze back to the wash opening. "Power means something worth stealing." He pauses. We stay careful. We kill the fire the way we always do. Richard spreads the coals out thin, then shovels dirt over them, then spreads more dirt, then presses it flat with the bottom of his cup so it looks like nothing happened. I pick up the bits of split wood and toss them into a sack so nothing shiny is left behind. I don't want someone following our trash trail. We sleep in turns. When it is my turn to watch, I sit with my back against the rock and hold my slingshot in my lap. I keep a bolt ready between my fingers, so if I hear walkers drift too close, I can toss noise away from our hide without yelling or running. Richard sleeps light, boots on, machete within reach. Morning comes grey and cold, then the sun climbs and turns it harsh fast. Richard nudges me awake, and we move before the light gets high. We drink measured mouthfuls, pack tight, and step out of the wash with our footprints kept close together so we look like one person at a glance. That trick has saved us from a couple of curious strangers who count tracks for a living. We keep off the old mining road and cut across hard ground where prints do not hold well. The land is wide, empty, and boring in the way that makes a person drop his guard. I don't let myself do that. I keep checking low spots for wire, keep checking brush for unnatural lines, keep scanning for glints that could be glass or metal. Richard stays ahead, watching the horizon for dust trails. Late morning, we find the trailer frame again, the one we picked through earlier in the week. We don't go inside. We go around it and check the dirt under the hitch where someone might stash something. Richard finds a bottle cap half buried and holds it up. Fresh. He tosses it into the scrub with a short flick. No reason to leave clues. We crest a low ridge and stop. Richard lifts the binoculars and scans the sky. I keep my eyes on the ground and the open flats below, watching for any movement that looks too straight or too deliberate. 10 minutes pass. Nothing. Another few minutes. Then the sound comes. Faint at first, then clear. The drone crosses the sky again. Same direction, same speed, same steady line. Richard watches it through the binoculars and tracks it until it is almost a dot. Then he lowers the binoculars and points with his whole hand, not a finger. A distant cluster of shapes breaks the horizon. Something upright. Antennas or poles. Something that does not belong out here. Richard looks at me. We follow from distance. If we see people, we turn away. I nod. If we see food, we do not sprint at it. Richard nods once. Correct. We move in a long, cautious curve, using shallow gullies and low ridges to keep our silhouettes broken. We stop often. We listen. We scan. We avoid the open road even when it would be faster. Faster routes are where strangers lay surprises for other strangers. In the early afternoon, we spot two walkers in the distance drifting near a patch of collapsed fencing. I pull a steel ball bearing and send it into a scrap pile far left. The ping pulls both walkers away from our line. Richard gives me a quick thumbs up without looking at me. That is his version of praise. We find a stash under a broken plastic bin, 2 sealed bottles of water, and a packet of crackers wrapped in tape. My hands hover over it, and I do not touch it. Richard studies the dirt around it and points at a faint toe print, fresh enough that the edge is still sharp. He backs away, slow. We wait 15 minutes in a shallow dip, watching the stash spot from a distance. Nothing moves. No figures appear. No long gun barrel glints. Richard shifts and finally nods. We go in, take 1 bottle and the crackers, and leave the other bottle behind. If it is bait, taking everything is what the trap builder expects. Taking one is still risky, but we can't keep moving on bad pump water. We walk until the sun starts dropping. The cluster of shapes on the horizon grows clearer, and the air begins to smell faintly of old smoke and burned plastic. That smell shouldn't last for years, but burned stuff leaves residue in the ground, and the wind stirs it up when it cuts across a wreck field. Richard slows us down even more. He doesn't say why. He doesn't have to. The smell means a place where humans did loud things once, and loud places collect trouble. We reach the fence line near dusk. The ground ahead is a mess of burned-out vehicles, twisted frames, and scattered equipment that rusted into sharp edges. Bones and torn clothing sit in pockets of shade under metal sheets. The scene looks old, not fresh. It looks like a failed rush by people who thought strength and tools could open anything. Walkers drift through the wreckage in slow loops. Some snag on metal and sway in place. Some bump into a burned truck and turn, then wander off again. Richard counts on his fingers. I see at least 7 close, more deeper in. We don't go into it. We stay outside the fence where we can move fast. The drone appears again and circles once above the wreck field, then heads toward the far side. It drops altitude a little and glides toward a low rise where a plain house shape sits alone with antennas behind it. The house looks too square and too intact to be a normal ruin. Richard points toward a concrete ramp leading down into the ground near the wreck field. The ramp is filled with rubble and concrete blocks. Somebody did that on purpose. Not decay, not collapse. Work, planning. Richard stares at it for 2 seconds, then pulls his gaze away and points toward the house. We circle along the fence until we find a place where it is down and the ground is clear enough to cross without clanging metal. We move one step at a time, testing each patch of dirt for wire or loose scrap. I follow Richard's exact footprints. When he stops, I stop. When he crouches, I crouch. We reach the edge of the yard around the house and freeze behind a low berm. Up close, it does not look like a home. The windows are narrow. The door is heavy. Cameras sit under the eaves. Vents are protected by grates that look newer than anything out here. A metal post in the yard has a small sensor box mounted on top. Richard stays crouched, eyes moving across the roofline, the vents, the corners, and the ground. I keep my slingshot low and ready, not because it can stop anything big, but because it can put sound somewhere else fast. The yard looks clean in a way that makes me nervous. No trash, no scattered boards, no random scraps that wind would have moved into place over years. A place stays this neat only when something keeps it neat. The faint whine of the drone fades behind the house, then disappears completely. I cannot see it, but I can picture it landing on a pad or tucking into some sheltered nook. Richard raises 2 fingers and points at my eyes, then points at the dirt. Look for wires. I nod and scan the ground in front of us. No tripline glint, no fresh stake, no disturbed sand in a straight strip. That does not mean it is safe. Richard shifts his weight, slow enough to keep gravel from crunching. He leans close and whispers, "If this place speaks, do not answer fast." I do not whisper back right away. My mouth feels dry from the day's heat and the bad water. I nod once so he can see it without me making sound. A speaker crackles above the door. The voice that comes out is calm and flat, as if it is reading from a list. 2 individuals detected. Remain where you are. Do not approach the entry. Richard does not move. I do not move. The voice pauses, then continues. Primary subject identified as David. Secondary subject identified as Richard. The voice says our names cleanly. No question mark in the tone. It does not sound pleased or angry. It sounds certain. Richard keeps his hands low and open where the cameras can see. His pistol stays hidden under his jacket. He speaks toward the door in a voice that stays quiet and controlled. Who is talking? He does not add anything else. He does not argue. The speaker answers. Facility management system, designation caretaker. Remain where you are. A pause. Weapons detected. Do not raise weapons. I glance at Richard without turning my head much. Richard shifts his eyes toward me and lifts 1 finger, then points down. Keep still. I keep still. Richard speaks again. How do you know our names? The speaker answers fast. Audio capture from prior encounters. Visual identification confirmation. Records maintained. That hits me in a simple way. This thing has heard us before. That means the drone has watched us before, or there are microphones, or both. Richard holds his posture. He does not ask 10 questions at once. He asks one question at a time, the way he does when someone points a gun at his face. Richard says, "What do you want?" The speaker answers, "Manual intervention required to maintain water and power systems. In exchange, controlled access will be granted to living quarters and one limited warehouse section. Armory access denied." I want to laugh at the word armory because it sounds like a fairy tale word now, but I keep my mouth shut. Richard asks, "Why us?" The speaker answers, "You have not attempted forced entry. You have arrived without a group. You have avoided unnecessary firearm discharge. Risk profile acceptable." Richard's jaw tightens. He does not show teeth or grin. He stays serious. He says, "Proof you are real. Proof this is not bait." The speaker pauses for a brief moment, then answers, "Approach the entry in a straight line. Stop at the painted mark. Hands empty. Entry will open for 5 seconds. Failure to comply will result in denial of access." Richard keeps his eyes on the cameras and the door seam. He lifts his left hand slightly and points at my slingshot, then points at my hatchet, then points at my pack. "Put it down." I unhook the slingshot and set it on the berm beside me, then set the hatchet down with the handle toward me so it cannot clatter. I slide my pack off and set it down slow. Richard does the same with his machete, laying it flat so the wrapped blade does not flash. Richard steps out from the berm first, hands visible, palms open. I follow half a step behind him, matching his pace. The yard feels exposed. Cameras can see everything. If someone sits on a ridge with a rifle, this is the moment a person gets taken. Richard keeps his head level, eyes scanning without jerking. The painted mark is a faded white stripe on the cracked concrete path. We stop on it. The door makes a soft click, then another. Then the lock bolts slide back inside the frame. The door opens a few inches, then swings wider, smooth, controlled, and quiet. Cool air pushes out, clean air. It smells like filtered air and sealed plastic, not smoke or rot. Richard leans his head forward enough to see inside without stepping in. He does not cross the threshold yet. He looks left, then right, then up. I see his eyes flick to a corner camera inside the entry room. He holds still, listening. A distant engine sound carries across the rec field. It rises, then falls, then rises again. A vehicle, not a drone, a real engine. That sound is too familiar. It is the sound of people who still have gas, and people who still have gas almost never want to share. Richard makes a decision without talking. He steps inside fast and controlled. I grab my pack with one hand and slide in right behind him. The moment my boot clears the threshold, the door swings shut. Locks slide. The outside engine sound drops to a dull vibration through the walls. The entry room is narrow and clean, with a hard floor and walls that look like reinforced panels. A ceiling light strip runs the length of the room. A small desk sits against one wall, with a screen and a few physical switches. A wall panel near the desk has a recessed spout and a basin. Another door stands at the far end with warning labels and a wheel handle. Richard stands with his back near the door and keeps his eyes on the corners. He does not touch anything yet. I set my pack down near my feet and keep my hands visible. I feel watched from multiple angles, not in a spooky way, in a simple machine way. Cameras and sensors doing what they were built to do. The speaker inside the room activates. Entry confirmed. Remain inside the terminal structure. External approach detected. Maintain silence. The voice volume is lower now, but still clear. Manual intervention agreement pending. Confirm acceptance. Richard speaks toward the ceiling. What happens if we say no? Caretaker answers. You will be denied access. Water ration will not be provided. External threats will continue to approach. This structure will remain sealed. Richard does not look at me, but he speaks as if he is including me anyway. Terms, Caretaker answers. Complete required manual interventions under instruction. Access to living quarters will be granted in stages. Access to one warehouse section will be granted with ration controls. Armory access denied. No guess. No attempts to force access. No damage to terminal structure. Violation results in permanent denial. Richard says, water first. Caretaker answers, ration release available upon acceptance. Richard pauses. He keeps his voice even. We accept. Under instruction, one step at a time. A green light appears beside the water spout. The wall panel slides open with a soft motor sound. Richard gestures at me with 2 fingers. Go. I step to the spout and pull out my canteen. My canteen looks dirty in this clean room. I hold it under the spout and wait. Water runs steady and clear. I fill the canteen, cap it, and step back. Richard fills his bottle next, caps it, and places it by his boot. Neither of us drinks yet. That is a habit from too many bad surprises. We keep it sealed until we have a second to think. Caretaker speaks again. Manual intervention 1. External breaker panel reset required to stabilize power routing for the drone bay and well-shed filtration. The screen on the desk lights up, showing a map of the surface structures. It shows this house as terminal. It shows a small square labeled well-shed. It shows a line labeled Corridor A connecting the terminal to a side passage. Richard steps to the desk without sitting. He keeps his body angled so he can see both the screen and the door. He does not touch the switches yet. External threats. Caretaker answers. 4 individuals detected at the perimeter rec field. 1 vehicle. Movement pattern indicates search behavior. Richard looks at the far interior door, then back to the screen. He keeps his voice low. Open an external camera view. The screen changes to grainy footage of the rec field. 4 people move between burned vehicles. 1 man carries a long gun. Another man carries a crowbar. A woman wears a faded hoodie with a bright patch on one shoulder. Another woman wears a cap and a backpack with a rolled sleeping pad attached. I watch the screen and keep my mouth shut, but my brain starts assigning nicknames on its own. Hoodie patch, crowbar, long gun, cap. I do not say them out loud. Richard's posture tells me this is not the moment for humor. Caretaker speaks. Proceed with manual intervention 1. Corridor A. Access will open for 30 seconds. Remain within marked corridor. Return to terminal immediately. A small light beside the far interior door turns yellow. Richard holds up a hand to me. Palm down. Stay calm. He reaches into his jacket and adjusts his pistol without drawing it. He picks up his machete and holds it low. He points at my slingshot and then at the corridor door. Bring it. I hook the slingshot back onto my belt and pick up my pack. The far door clicks and swings open inward, revealing a narrow concrete passage with a grated roof. The passage blocks line of sight from the open yard, but does not block sound completely. Painted stripes on the floor mark a center line. Richard steps into the passage first. I follow close. The air outside is warmer and dry. Dust sits on the passage floor in thick lines. The passage ends at a recess with a metal breaker panel. A small speaker is mounted near it. Caretaker speaks through that speaker. Open the breaker panel. Switch group 3 is down. Raise group 3. Confirm indicator. Richard opens the panel door and studies the labeled switches. He raises 3 toggles. A light turns green. I hear the engine sound again. Closer now. Not close enough to see. Close enough to feel it through the walls. I also hear footsteps crunching on gravel outside the passage. The footsteps are not in the passage. They are on the open yard side. Richard closes the breaker panel and signals me back with 2 quick finger flicks. Move. We walk back fast, careful not to scrape boots. As we reach the terminal door, the voices outside get clearer for a moment. A man's voice says, "This is the spot. You see the cameras." Another voice, a woman's voice, says, "Do not touch anything until I look." The crowbar clinks on rock. Richard's eyes narrow. He pushes through the terminal door, and I follow. The door closes behind us. The camera feed on the screen updates. The 4 people move closer to the terminal house, stepping around the sensor post, studying the vents. The man with the crowbar taps the wall lightly, then harder. The sound carries through the structure as a dull thud. Caretaker speaks. Power routing stabilized. Manual intervention 2 required. Well-shed intake filter frame jammed. Water quality will degrade without correction. Richard keeps watching the screen. He says, "Lockdown." Caretaker answers, "Terminal structure is sealed. Exterior entry denied." The man with the crowbar hits the wall again, louder. The woman in the hoodie turns and looks toward the rec field. Walkers respond to noise even when the noise comes through concrete and air. On the screen, I see 2 walkers turn their heads and start drifting toward the yard. Richard leans closer to the screen. "Can you put sound somewhere else?" Caretaker answers, Remote alarm pole available at perimeter sector 4. Activation will attract walkers away from terminal. Richard does not hesitate. Activate. A second later, the screen shows a pole near the rec field flashing a light and blasting a harsh alarm tone. The 4 people jerk their heads toward it. The man with the crowbar steps back and looks at the others. The woman in the cap points toward the alarm pole, then toward the fence line, then toward the rec field. The group splits. 2 people move toward the alarm, moving fast and sloppy. The man with the crowbar stays near the terminal house with the woman in the hoodie. Richard keeps his voice quiet. They will come back. I nod. My hands tighten on my pack straps. I look at the far interior door that leads down and think about what sits under this house. I think about food in sealed cans and water in tanks. I also think about a trap built out of steel and cameras. Richard turns toward the ceiling speaker. Open living quarters. Caretaker answers. Living quarters access requires completion of well-shed filter correction and air cycling reset. Richard's jaw shifts. Show air cycling. The screen changes to another map view with labels I do not like. Service corridor, intake, residential wing, sealed zones. Caretaker adds, infected residents exist within sealed zones. Do not open sealed doors. It says, infected residents in a flat tone, as if it is describing rodents in a wall. That tells me this is not a rumor. This is a fact. Richard points at the well-shed square on the map. We do the filter. He points at me, and then at the slingshot pouch. You place sound. If something moves, you push it away. I nod. My mouth is dry. I keep it closed. Caretaker speaks. Corridor A will open for 20 seconds. Well-shed door will unlock upon approach. Proceed now. A yellow light appears beside a side passage door on the map and beside a real door on the wall. Richard picks up his machete. He does not draw his pistol. He keeps his hands visible when possible, but he also keeps steel ready. I grab my pack and keep my slingshot at my belt. We move through the corridor again. At the end of the passage, a walker has drifted closer than before, pulled by the crowbar noise and the alarm pole. The walker stands near the corridor exit, head tilted, body swaying. It is close enough that I can see the frayed fabric on its sleeves and the cracked skin on its hands. Richard stops and holds his fist up. I stop. The walker turns its head toward the passage opening, as if it can hear our shoes on dust. Richard points at my slingshot and then points past the walker to a metal post near the fence line. I pull a steel ball bearing and raise the slingshot slow. I aim past the walker and fire. The ball bearing hits the post with a sharp ping. The walker turns away and shuffles toward the sound. Richard signals move with a quick wave. We move along the passage wall opposite the walker, steps placed careful. We clear the passage and slip out into the side yard where the well shed sits. The shed looks like a reinforced utility box with a heavy door and a keypad. No window. A small vent with a grate. The yard around it is clean, no weeds, no trash. The voices from the looters are close now, but not in this side yard. The man with the crowbar is still near the front door. I can hear him tapping metal and cursing when nothing opens. The woman in the hoodie tells him to stop hitting. He hits again anyway. The well shed keypad beeps and the door latch clicks. Caretaker unlocks it for us. Richard pulls the door open and steps inside. I follow and shut it behind us without slamming. The well shed is tight and hot, filled with pipes, a pressure tank, and a filtration rack with cartridge housings. A small panel flashes a yellow light. A tool hook on the wall holds a screwdriver, a small wrench, and a pair of gloves. That tool hook looks used recently, not by us, by the system's own maintenance plan, or by someone years ago before everything went bad. Caretaker speaks through a small speaker in the shed. Remove outer panel on filter frame, clear track debris, reseat latch, confirm green indicator. Richard points at the screws, then hands me the screwdriver. His finger taps twice on the rack near the bottom. Start there. I put the screwdriver tip into the first screw head and turn slow. The screw resists. Dust makes threads stubborn. My hand slips once, and the metal tip scrapes across the rack with a short squeal. Richard's head snaps toward me. His eyes go hard. He does not speak. He does not need to. Outside, a man's voice says, "I heard that." Footsteps crunch across gravel. The steps angle toward this side yard. Richard points at the shed wall. then points at my slingshot. Sound away, far away. I set the screwdriver down and pull the smooth stone from my pouch. The vent gap near the top of the shed door gives me a thin view of the yard. I angle the slingshot through that gap and aim toward the wreck field, toward the loudest metal scrap I can see. I fire. The stone hits a sheet of twisted metal with a loud slap. The sound carries. Footsteps outside pause. I hear the woman in the hoodie say, "Over there, he is messing with us." The footsteps shift direction away from the shed. Richard nods once, quick, and points at the screws again. I go back to work. I keep the screwdriver steady and turn with slow pressure. The first screw backs out, then the second, then the third. The panel comes loose. Behind the panel, the filter frame latch is visible. Sand has jammed the lower track. Small grit piles sit in the groove. I use the screwdriver tip to scrape it out, careful not to flick grit into the housing. Richard holds the flashlight from his pocket, angled down. The light is dim and yellow. He keeps it tight on the work, not spraying it around the shed. I clear the groove and wipe it with a cloth rag from my pocket. The rag turns brown instantly. I reseat the latch and push until it clicks. The indicator on the panel shifts from yellow to green. Caretaker speaks. Filter frame latch confirmed. Water ration stability improved. Manual intervention 3 required. Air cycling reset requires physical valve rotation in service corridor. Richard's face tightens. He looks at the shed door, then at me, then toward the ceiling speaker. "We need living quarters access." Caretaker answers. "Proceed to service corridor junction. Instructions will follow." The looter voices rise again, closer than before. The man with the crowbar is annoyed. "This door is not normal." The woman in the hoodie says, "Stop, you are feeding the walkers." The man answers with a string of words that I do not repeat in my head because it does not help. Richard cracks the well shed door open an inch and looks out. He scans left and right, then pulls it wider. The side yard is clear for the moment. The walker we pinged earlier is not visible. The looters are near the front still, based on the voices and the direction of the sound. We slip out of the well shed and move back along the corridor to the terminal. Richard keeps his machete low and ready. I keep my slingshot in hand now, projectile pinched between fingers so I can fire without digging in my pouch. Inside the terminal, Caretaker opens the far interior door again. Proceed down stairwell to junction. Maintain silence. External threats remain present. Lockdown active. Richard nods once and moves. I follow. The stairwell leads down into cooler air. The lights are steady. The walls are clean, with scuff marks along the base where shoes scraped during hurried movement a long time ago. That tells me people ran here. People do not run inside a bunker unless something is chasing. At the junction, Caretaker speaks through a ceiling speaker. Proceed to valve station. Rotate valve wheel clockwise until seated. Confirm indicator on panel. A door ahead unlocks with a click. Richard looks at the door seam, and then at me. His eyes ask the question without words. If something is behind it, do we run, or do we fight? I lift my slingshot a little and nod toward the left corridor. If it goes bad, I will throw sound and we will move left. Richard opens the door and steps through. I follow. The valve station room is small, with pipes running along the ceiling and down the walls, and a wheel valve in the center with a metal handle. A panel on the wall shows a red light. The air smells like old rubber and machine oil. No rot smell, no wet smell. That is good. Richard moves to the valve wheel and grips it. He turns clockwise. The wheel resists, then gives. He turns again. I stand near the door and watch the corners. Watch the floor. Watch for any movement that does not belong. A faint thump comes from the wall behind the pipes, followed by another. A sealed zone. Something inside pushing against a door or a panel. Richard does not stop turning. He finishes the rotation until the wheel seats. The panel light shifts from red to green. Caretaker speaks. Air cycling reset confirmed. Living quarters access stage 1 authorized. Return to terminal. External threat activity escalating. We return to the stairwell and go up. Richard's pace is steady, not fast, not slow. He keeps control. I follow with my slingshot ready, hatchet still on my belt. Back in the terminal, the screen shows the front yard camera. The looters have moved closer to the door. The man with the crowbar swings hard at a vent cover near the base. The cover bends slightly. He looks pleased and swings again. The woman in the hoodie steps between him and the vent and shoves his shoulder. He pushes back. The man with the long gun lifts his hands in a calming gesture and points toward the wreck field where walkers are drifting in closer now, pulled by the repeated impacts. Caretaker speaks. External threats are attempting to compromise ventilation. Risk to terminal integrity elevated. Recommend activation of additional remote alarms to redirect walkers. Recommend lowering exterior lighting to reduce visual attraction. Richard says, "Do it." Caretaker answers, "Executing." On the screen, the yard lights dim until the house looks dead from a distance. A second alarm pole near the wreck field activates, pulling walkers away in a slow drift. The looters look confused. The man with the crowbar curses and kicks the bent vent cover. Richard points at a new indicator on the screen. Living quarters. A door icon below the terminal map shows as unlocked. Caretaker speaks. Proceed through stairwell to living pod. Occupancy limited to 2. Warehouse access remains locked. Armory access denied. I look at Richard and finally allow myself a small grin. Living pod. That sounds like a hotel room with extra rules. Richard does not grin back, but his eyes soften for half a second. Move. We go down the stairwell again, past the junction, down another corridor that opens into a small living area. It is not luxury. It is clean and functional. 2 bunks built into the wall. A small sink with a foot pump. A toilet in a sealed room. A tiny kitchenette with a locked cabinet and a simple counter. A storage locker with 2 sets of plain clothes and a stack of folded blankets in sealed plastic. The air down here is cooler than outside. The sound is different too. No wind, no distant scraping, only the steady hum of a fan and the faint tick of a pipe cooling. Caretaker speaks from a speaker in the living pod. Living quarters stage 1 active. Water ration will be dispensed twice daily at terminal spout. Food ration will be dispensed upon warehouse access authorization. Manual intervention cycle will continue. Confirm compliance. Richard answers, "Comply." He does not add politeness. He does not add jokes. I sit on the lower bunk for half a second, then stand again because sitting makes me feel exposed. I put my pack on the floor and open it to check the bottles we took earlier. I keep them sealed. Richard walks the pod perimeter, checking corners, checking vents, checking the bathroom door. He opens the storage locker and finds 2 sealed bars in a pouch labeled emergency ration. He holds them up and looks toward the ceiling speaker. Food, Caretaker answers. Emergency rations in living pod are limited. Warehouse access required for sustained supply. Warehouse access requires authorization token. Richard's eyes narrow. Authorization token from who? Caretaker answers. Registered owner. Authorization token is linked to registered owner biometric and physical token. Registered owner status. Infected. Registered owner location. Residential wing sealed zone. I stare at Richard. Richard stares at the wall speaker. Neither of us speaks for a moment. That sentence carries weight in a plain way. The owner is still here, in some sealed wing, walking around as one of the dead. Richard asks, "Is there any other way?" Caretaker answers, "No. Warehouse Section 1 is locked behind authorization requirement. Manual override is not available without integrity violation. Integrity violation triggers denial of access." I let a breath out through my nose and look around the living pod again. 2 bunks, a sink, a toilet, a couple of sealed bars, clean air. This place can keep us alive longer than the desert can, even without the warehouse. But not forever. Water ration depends on filters. Filters depend on manual work. Manual work depends on us moving through corridors where infected residents still exist. Richard points at the corridor map on the small panel near the living pod door. He traces a finger from living pod to residential wing. The line passes through the junction and into an area marked sealed zone. He does not speak. He does not need to. He is thinking the same thing I am thinking. I finally speak, voice low. If the owner is walking down there, he will not hand over a token. Richard looks at me for a second and answers, "We take it." He does not use any dramatic words. He says it like he says we take water or we take a battery. Simple, cold, necessary. Caretaker speaks before we move. External threats remain present. Current recommendation: remain within living pod until external threats depart. Manual intervention schedule resumes in 6 hours. Warehouse authorization retrieval can be attempted at your discretion. Risk is high. Richard sits on the edge of the lower bunk and pulls his pistol out for the first time since we entered. He checks the magazine and counts rounds by touch, then seats the magazine again. He keeps the suppressor wrapped. He does not chamber anything. He sets the pistol on the bunk beside him and looks at me. Richard says, "We wait for the looters to leave, then we plan the token." I nod. I walk to the sink and pump a small stream of water into my hands to wipe dust off my fingers. The water is cold. I do not waste it. I do not splash. We eat 1 emergency bar each. The bar tastes like dry oats and sugar and something chemical. I chew slow because a fast chew does not make it last longer. Richard eats his in 3 bites, then drinks 2 small sips from his bottle and caps it again. We move back up to the terminal after a short rest because sitting down too long makes me feel weak, and weakness gets noticed. The screen shows the looters still outside. The group has shifted positions. The woman in the cap has joined the man with the crowbar near the vent. The woman in the hoodie stands near the sensor post, watching the yard with sharp posture. The man with the long gun walks toward the wreck field, scanning, then returns with an armful of scrap. He drops it near the door and talks animatedly. He points toward the blocked ramp. He points toward the house. He points toward the side yard. He is trying to solve the puzzle. Caretaker speaks quietly. External threats are attempting to locate secondary access routes. Side yard approach risk increasing. Richard points at the screen and asks, "Any non-lethal deterrent?" Caretaker answers, "Remote alarms, exterior lighting control, door lock integrity, no other deterrents installed." The lack of weapons makes sense to me in a hard way. The owner built a bunker that was meant to stay hidden and sealed, not a fortress meant to fight. Guns and turrets require ammo, maintenance, and human oversight. The owner trusted locks and distance and rules. Now those choices keep us alive and also leave us exposed to anyone stubborn enough to wait. The man with the crowbar wedges the bent vent cover farther open. He sticks his face close, peering into darkness, and says something to the others. The woman in the hoodie grabs his shoulder and yanks him back. Her mouth moves fast. Her hands chop the air in annoyed gestures. The man shrugs her off and leans in again. Richard leans toward the ceiling speaker. "Can you vent anything through that vent?" Caretaker answers. "Vent system is isolated. No exhaust release through compromised vent. Safety protocols engaged." Richard taps the desk with his fingers, once, twice, then stops. That tapping is his thinking habit. I point at the screen and whisper, "If he keeps beating on that wall, walkers will arrive." Richard nods without looking away. "Yes." He turns to the speaker. "More alarms. Farther." Caretaker answers, "Available." A third alarm pole activates farther down the fence line. Walkers in the wreck field turn in a slow wave and drift toward the new sound. The looters pause and look toward it. The man with the crowbar steps away from the vent, annoyed. The man with the long gun gestures at the alarm pole and says something that looks like an argument. The woman in the hoodie points at the ground near the terminal door and then points toward the wreck field again. She is thinking about tracks. I do not like that. Tracks tell stories. Richard looks at me and moves his hand in a circle near his head, the sign for change plan. He points toward the side corridor door. He points at my slingshot. He points at the camera feed. Distract them away from the side yard so we can move if needed. Caretaker speaks. Manual intervention cycle resumes. Current recommendation: remain within structure. External threats are likely to remain for extended duration. Richard asks, "How long?" Caretaker answers, "Unknown." I stare at the looters on the screen and pick out details that matter. Packs, tools, no heavy cutting gear, no big ladder, no rope visible. That means they cannot easily reach the roof vents without improvising. Improvising takes time. Time lets walkers drift closer. The man with the crowbar picks up a sheet of metal and slams it against the door in frustration. The sound is loud enough that the terminal walls vibrate faintly. Walkers respond. More heads turn. More bodies drift. The woman in the hoodie slaps the man's arm, hard, then points toward the walkers. He throws his hands up and backs away. The man with the long gun walks to the vehicle and opens the rear. He pulls out a small can and shakes it. Fuel. Then he looks toward the door again. Richard's eyes sharpen. Fuel means smoke. Smoke means panic. People use smoke to force someone out of a space. People use fire to break locks when they do not care what gets ruined. I point at the screen and whisper, "He has fuel." Richard nods once. His face does not change. He turns to the ceiling speaker. "If they light a fire, what happens?" Caretaker answers. "Fire detection systems will activate. Exterior sprinkler coverage is limited. Terminal integrity is high. Exterior assets may be damaged." Richard says, "We cannot lose the well." Caretaker answers, "Well, shed is reinforced. Exterior fire risk remains." Richard stares at the screen, then points at the alarm poles on the map. "Activate near their vehicle." Caretaker answers, "Activation near vehicle increases walker convergence near vehicle." Richard says, "Do it." He does not dress it up. He makes a simple choice. An alarm pole near the vehicle activates. The looters jerk back, startled. The man with the long gun steps away from the fuel can, looking toward the wreck field. Walkers begin drifting in that direction, pulled by sound. The looters respond in the way hungry, tired people respond. The man with the long gun waves his arms and shouts, then starts pushing the others toward the vehicle. The woman in the hoodie points at the terminal door, then at the vehicle, then at the walkers. Her mouth moves fast. She wants one more attempt before leaving. The man with the crowbar moves toward the vent again. The man with the long gun grabs his shoulder and yanks him back. The crowbar man shoves him off. The argument turns physical for a second. That second matters. Walkers close distance. The looters see it and back off. The woman in the cap grabs the fuel can and tosses it into the vehicle. The man with the long gun slams the rear shut and points toward the road. The woman in the hoodie lingers, staring at the terminal door, then spits on the ground and turns away. The group moves back toward the vehicle, faster now. They climb in. The engine starts. The vehicle lurches and rolls, then accelerates away from the alarm pole. Dust trails behind it. I do not relax. I watch the dust trail until it fades behind the hills. Walkers keep drifting toward where the vehicle was. The alarm pole continues for a set time, then shuts off. The wreck field returns to its slow movement pattern. Richard looks toward the ceiling speaker. "Are they gone?" Caretaker answers, "External threats have exited perimeter sensor range. Risk remains. Future return likely." Richard nods once, then turns to me. "Token." We go back down to the living pod and lay our gear out on the floor with the kind of attention we never had in the open. In the desert, we do not have space to spread out. Here we can. That changes everything, and also makes mistakes easier because comfort makes the mind soft. Richard sets his pistol on the bunk and pulls out his spare magazine. He checks both. He counts rounds by touch again. He sets the spare magazine back into his jacket pocket. He wraps the suppressor cloth tighter and checks the tape so no fabric can snag when he draws. I check my slingshot bands again and decide I cannot trust the cracked sections for heavy pulls. I adjust my draw length shorter. That reduces speed and range, but it reduces the chance of a snap. I sort my projectiles into 2 pockets, heavy steel in one, lighter scrap in another. The lighter scrap is for making noise, not for accuracy. Richard stands near the door and speaks toward the speaker. "Show route to registered owner." Caretaker answers, "Residential wing sealed zone. Access is possible through service corridor. Sealed doors will open only for controlled intervals. Resident infected density, unknown. Environmental conditions, stable. Recommendation, do not attempt." Richard keeps his voice level. "We will attempt. Give map." The panel shows a simplified route with door icons and timer notes. I watch and memorize the key points. Junction, service corridor, maintenance alcove, residential wing door. I ask, "What is the token?" Caretaker answers, "Physical token, wristband. Secondary token, key fob. Either will satisfy warehouse section 1 authorization." Richard says, "Can you track wristband?" Caretaker answers, "No. Sensor coverage in sealed zones is limited due to prior outbreak containment actions. Visual confirmation may be possible if cameras in residential wing are operational." Richard says, "Show cameras." Caretaker answers, "Attempting." A camera feed appears on the terminal screen upstairs. We go up to view it. The feed is grainy and dim. A corridor with carpet scraps and overturned furniture. A doorway hanging open. A figure shuffling slowly in the distance, head down, bumping into a wall and turning. Another figure farther back, partially hidden behind a couch frame. The camera angle shifts to another view. A small office with a desk and papers scattered. A framed photo on the wall. Another figure standing still near the doorway, then turning slowly as if reacting to the camera motor sound. The third view shows a larger space that looks like a lounge. A rug, a bookshelf, a bar counter, multiple figures. Too many to count fast. They move slow, drifting, bumping, turning. Some are stuck behind furniture. Some wander in circles. I stare at the lounge feed and whisper, "That is a lot." Richard answers, "We do not go into that room." He points at the corridor feed. "We use the corridor." Caretaker speaks. "Sealed door to residential corridor can be opened for 5 seconds. After 5 seconds, door will close. Obstruction will trigger denial." Richard says, "Understood." He looks at me. "We do not block doors." I nod. Richard moves us back down the stairwell. We pause at the junction. Richard holds up one finger. Listen. I listen. I hear only the hum of fans and the faint tick of pipes. No scraping close. That does not mean the corridor is clear. It means the corridor is quiet. Caretaker says, "Proceed to maintenance alcove. Stage door control will begin." A door ahead clicks. We move. The maintenance alcove is a small square room with shelves of spare parts in sealed bins and a rolling cart. A mop bucket, a folded caution sign, a clean space that looks used and then abandoned. That is the story of this place in one room. Richard points at the shelves and then at me. "Grab anything small and useful." I scan quickly and pick items that matter to us, not items that look expensive. 2 rolls of tape, a box of nitrile gloves, a small bottle of hand sanitizer that is half full, a pack of bandage rolls, a spare flashlight battery module labeled with a date that means nothing to me now. Richard checks a sealed bin and finds a heavy set of bolt cutters. He lifts them, tests the weight, then sets them back. He looks toward the ceiling speaker. "If I take these, will you deny?" Caretaker answers, "Removal of facility tools from maintenance alcove is permitted within living quarters only. Attempted use on restricted doors will trigger denial." Richard leaves the bolt cutters. He does not want anything that makes Caretaker suspicious. Caretaker speaks. "Residential corridor door will open on my mark. 5 seconds. Move through immediately. Do not linger." Richard positions himself in front of the door with machete low. I stand behind him with slingshot ready and hatchet on my belt. The door clicks. It swings open. Cold, stale air spills out. The corridor beyond is dimmer, lit by emergency lights. The carpet is stained and dusty. A side table sits overturned. A shoe lies in the middle of the hall. Richard steps through immediately. I follow. The door closes behind us with a firm click. We are inside the sealed zone now. A figure stands at the far end of the corridor, half turned toward us, head tilted. Another figure is closer, slumped against a wall, then shifting as if waking. The corridor is quiet, but our presence has changed the air and sound. Even a shoe scuff matters here. Richard raises 2 fingers and points left. A side room doorway stands open. We move toward it. The goal is simple. Find the owner's wristband or key fob without drawing the whole wing into motion. We slip into the side room. It looks like an office. Desk, computer monitor, a shelf of binders, a wall safe that is closed, a small keypad by the safe. I do not touch the safe. Richard does not touch the safe. We are not here for treasure. We are here for a token. The office has a coat hanging on a hook. The coat looks too clean compared with everything else. Richard steps toward it and checks the pockets without shaking the coat. He pulls out a plastic badge and a keyring. The keyring holds 2 keys and a small black fob with a metal loop. Richard holds the fob up. It has a small logo and a number stamped. I cannot read the number in the dim light without bringing the flashlight up, and bringing the flashlight up is a bad idea. Richard pockets the fob carefully. A thump comes from the corridor. One of the figures bumped the wall. Another slow shuffle follows closer. Richard points at the office door. Out. We move out. The corridor figure that was slumped against the wall is now upright and drifting toward us. The figure's hands lift and fall with slow motion. The face is cracked and dry. The mouth hangs open. It does not run. It does not need to. The corridor is narrow. Richard makes a quick hand sign. Left room. We move into another doorway without hesitation. This room looks like a bedroom. Bed frame, nightstand, a suitcase opened on the floor with clothes spilling out. The bedroom has a closet with sliding doors. Richard slides one open a few inches, then wider. Inside hang several jackets and a suit bag. Richard checks jacket cuffs for a wristband. Nothing. I hear the corridor figure scrape a foot on carpet. It is close now. Richard points at me, and then points at the far corner of the bedroom, where a window sits behind a narrow grate. He wants me to place sound away from the bedroom door if possible, but there is nowhere to throw sound inside a sealed bunker without it echoing back. I choose a different approach. I pull a small metal nut from my pouch and place it on the floor near the bedroom door. Then I step back and hold my slingshot ready. If the figure enters, the nut gives me a target to ping off the door frame and pull it away, but it might not work in this tight space. Richard leans close to the bedroom door and listens. Then he moves to the bed frame and crouches. Under the bed sits a small lockbox. Richard pulls it out slowly. The lockbox lid is open already. Inside is a wristband with a plastic module on it, plus a second fob. Richard takes the wristband and the fob, pockets both, and nods once. Done. He points toward the corridor. Back. The corridor figure is at the bedroom door now. The figure's head turns, catching our movement. It steps into the doorway, slow, hands lifting. Richard does not swing first. He backs away, keeping distance, trying to slip past. The corridor behind the figure is blocked by another figure that drifted closer. We are trapped in a narrow space now. Richard draws his pistol and brings it up, but he does not fire. He uses the pistol as a barrier and pushes the figure's shoulder to redirect it. The figure resists with dead weight and awkward pressure. The second figure behind it bumps forward. I step in with my hatchet, not for a clean hit, but to drive the first figure back enough to open space. I swing the hatchet head into the figure's skull area with a short, controlled strike. The hatchet sticks for a fraction of a second, then pops free when I pull back. The figure drops and stops moving. The second figure steps forward into the doorway space. Richard uses the machete now. He swings once, short and hard, aiming for the upper neck area. The blade catches, and the figure collapses. Richard steps back instantly, not lingering. We do not talk. We move. We step past both bodies and head down the corridor toward the sealed door we entered through. I keep my slingshot in my hand again and swap the hatchet back to my belt because the corridor gives me distance. A louder shuffle comes from farther down the corridor. More figures are reacting now, drawn by movement and the brief impacts. Even without gunfire, we made noise. Richard speaks toward the ceiling. Caretaker, door. No answer. He repeats it, sharper. Caretaker, door. The speaker remains silent. That means the system does not have active voice control in this sealed zone, or it is refusing to respond here. We reach the sealed door we came through. Richard grabs the handle and pulls. Locked. The door does not budge. Richard stares at the door seam, then looks at the ceiling corner where a camera sits, dim and dusty. He raises his voice slightly, still controlled. Open the door. A faint click comes from above, then the speaker activates. Door control requires terminal confirmation. You are outside authorized timing window. Richard's mouth tightens. We have the token. He pats his pocket once, enough to make the point. Open the door. Caretaker answers. Confirm token at terminal reader. Return to terminal. Richard looks at me, then looks down the corridor where figures are drifting closer. He says one sentence. We go deeper to loop back. I do not like it, but I nod because standing here arguing solves nothing. We move down the corridor in the opposite direction, away from the door. The corridor opens into a larger space that looks like a lounge. This is the room from the camera feed. The rug is stained. Furniture sits overturned. A bar counter is littered with empty bottles and cups that have long-dried residue. Several infected residents are in the lounge. Some stand still. Some drift in slow arcs. Some bump furniture and turn. Their heads pivot toward us as we enter. Movement pulls them faster than sound now because the room is open. Richard points toward a side hallway beyond the lounge. We do not cross the center of the room. We skirt the edge, staying close to the wall, stepping slow. I fire a steel ball bearing into the far corner behind the bar. The ping pulls 2 figures away from our path. One figure near the rug turns toward us anyway and shuffles forward. Richard keeps his machete low and tries to slip past without contact. The figure reaches. Richard uses his forearm to push the figure away without striking. The figure stumbles into a chair and gets hung up. We reach the side hallway and slip through. The hallway narrows and the number of figures drops. That is good. It also means if one gets in front of us, there is less room to slide around. The hallway ends at another door with a handwheel lock, similar to the one in the service corridor. Richard grabs the wheel and turns. The wheel moves. The door opens into a utility stairwell. The stairwell smells of concrete and dust. No carpet, no furniture, only scuff marks and a few dropped items on the steps. We move up 2 flights and reach a locked door at the top. Richard tries it. Locked. Caretaker's speaker activates above us. You have deviated from authorized corridor. Richard says, open this door or we get trapped. Caretaker answers, confirm token at terminal reader. Richard says, we cannot reach the terminal without this door. Caretaker pauses, then answers, door will open for 5 seconds. Proceed immediately. Do not obstruct. The lock clicks. The door opens. We push through into a familiar corridor near the junction. The door closes behind us. We move fast now, not running, but faster than before. The sealed zone behind us has stirred up. I hear shuffling and bumps through walls. The sound is muted but present. Back at the terminal, Richard holds the key fob up toward a small reader panel near the desk. A light turns green. Caretaker speaks. Authorization token accepted. Warehouse Section 1 access Stage 1 authorized. Living quarters Stage 2 authorized. Armory access denied. I want to laugh at armory access denied because it sounds like a joke built into the system, but I keep it in my head. Richard does not react. He asks, warehouse now. Caretaker answers, proceed to warehouse door. Maintain silence. External threats are not detected at this time. A door icon on the map flashes. A corridor route highlights. We go down the stairwell again toward the junction, then to a new door marked storage. The storage door unlocks with a heavy click and swings open. Inside is not a treasure vault. It is a warehouse shelf room with sealed bins, stacks of cases, and metal shelving. Some packages are intact. Some have chewed corners. Rodents got into some things. That is the first reality check. Richard moves along the shelves and checks labels. He finds cases of water filters, canned food, rice, dehydrated meals, soap, medical tape, disinfectant wipes, batteries, hand tools, and sealed clothing. He finds a crate of protein bars with 2 cases chewed open. Rodent droppings are visible. He closes the crate and moves on. I find a sealed box of water containers and pull out 2 collapsible jugs. I test the seals by squeezing. No leaks. I set them near the door. I also find a small pack of multivitamins and pocket it because we have been living on garbage food for years. Caretaker speaks. Ration control active. Removal limited to authorized daily allowance. Exceeding allowance will trigger denial. Richard looks up at the ceiling speaker. We will take what we need for tonight. Caretaker answers. Allowance for first day increased due to initial onboarding. Remove selected items to the living pod. We load carefully. We do not strip shelves. We take sealed items first. We take a few cans, a bag of rice, a small jar of salt, a box of electrolyte packets, soap, a roll of trash bags, and 2 replacement filter cartridges. Richard chooses medical items next. Gauze, antibiotic ointment, a thermometer, and a bottle of pain reliever tablets that is still sealed. We carry the load to the living pod in 2 trips. Each trip feels risky because every door movement is a moment something can go wrong, and this place has too many doors. Once the food is in the living pod, Richard sits on the lower bunk and finally allows himself a small exhale. He does not celebrate. He checks the door locks again, checks the corridor noise, and listens to the hum of the ventilation. I open a can and eat cold beans with a plastic spoon found in a sealed cutlery pack. The beans taste plain. Plain is good. Richard eats rice mixed with canned chicken, using a cup as a bowl. Caretaker speaks. Manual intervention schedule continues. Next required intervention, drone bay inspection and battery swap within 12 hours. Failure will reduce external surveillance and increase external threat risk. Richard answers, understood. He looks at me. We work for food. I nod and swallow another bite. We also work for water that does not taste like rust. Richard nods. His eyes look tired, but he does not say it. He stands and checks our gear again. We spend the next hours learning the bunker's rhythm. Caretaker opens a terminal spout at set times. The system gives short instructions. Richard follows them. I follow them. We do not try to be clever. When caretaker asks for a drone battery swap, it guides us to a small room behind the terminal, where the drone sits on a pad. The drone looks worn but maintained. Spare battery modules are stored in a sealed case. I handle the battery swap with gloves because a dirty contact can ruin the connection. The battery module clicks into place. The drone powers on with a low hum. Caretaker runs a self-check and confirms flight readiness. That sound makes me uneasy and relieved at the same time. Uneasy because it means eyes in the sky. Relieved because eyes in the sky keep strangers from walking up on us unseen. Late that night, the perimeter sensors pick up movement again. The looter vehicle has returned, farther out, not at the wreck field, but on a ridgeline beyond the fence. The group is smaller now. 2 people, the woman in the hoodie and the man with the long gun. Caretaker shows the camera feed. The 2 looters stand beside their vehicle, scanning with binoculars, watching the house lights, watching the drone pad area, trying to decide where the entrance is. Richard watches without speaking. He points at the remote alarm controls. He looks at me. His expression says he wants them gone without a fight. I nod once. Richard tells caretaker, "Run the drone." Caretaker answers, "Drone scan scheduled. Early launch possible. Launch noise may attract walkers." Richard says, "Launch." Caretaker launches the drone. The drone lifts into the night with a soft whine. The looters on the ridge look up. The woman in the hoodie raises an arm and points. The man with the long gun steps back toward the vehicle, uncertain. Richard tells caretaker, "Run alarm near the ridge, then shut off." Caretaker answers, "Executing." A remote pole closer to the ridge flashes a brief alarm tone, then stops. Walkers in the wreck field respond and drift toward that ridge line. Not fast, but enough to make 2 people rethink standing there. The woman in the hoodie watches the walkers drift. She looks back toward the house and holds her hands out, palms up in a frustrated gesture. The man with the long gun grabs her sleeve and pulls her toward the vehicle. They climb in and drive off again. Dust trail fading. Richard does not celebrate. He turns off the screen and sits on the bunk. He rubs dust off his hands with a wipe and checks his pistol again without drawing it. His routine is his calm. I sit on the other bunk and finally let myself speak one sentence that has been stuck in my head since the first moment the door spoke our names. "This place picked us." Richard looks at me and answers, "This place needs us." He points toward the ceiling speaker. "We keep it running. It keeps us fed." I look around the living pod again. 2 bunks, clean air, water ration, food that is not rotten. A toilet, a sink. After years of dirt and running, those things feel strange in a simple way. It makes my brain want to pretend the outside is gone. The outside is not gone. The cameras keep proving that. Caretaker speaks softly. Routine schedule updated. External threat likelihood, moderate. Water system stability, improved. Filter lifespan, finite. Manual intervention cycle continues. The voice pauses. "Thank you for compliance." Richard looks up at the speaker as if he wants to argue with the word "thank you." Then he shakes his head once and stands. He checks the door lock, then sets the machete beside the bunk. He keeps his pistol close. I lay my slingshot on my chest and close my eyes, not to sleep deep, but to rest. The ventilation hum stays steady. No alarms, no voices, no footsteps in the corridor. In the quiet, my mind tries to make jokes again. It tries to name caretaker. It tries to name the looters. It tries to name the infected in the sealed wing. Humor wants to return because humor is what keeps me moving. I keep it inside for now. Tomorrow will bring more doors, more tasks, more chances for something to go wrong. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you, what moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor, Jack's Nightmares, signing off.